Welcome to episode 71 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie, and producer, Johnny Pham. We're a week late, but hey, we're here. 2022 ranks, our first edition. Dalton and I went through, and we'll call this a first draft. So let's keep that in mind as we go through. But we're going to discuss a few differences here and there we may have, and also just maybe some key guys that kind of stick out in our rankings. But first, Dalton, new haircut, new you. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. We are 99 days away from the start of the NFL season, and we are less than a month away from gambling being legalized in the state of Kansas. So I am fully prepared to be homeless by time the NFL season begins.
Is it official? It's 30 days?
Yeah,
just rumors.
The bill will be signed.
Well, it was already signed, so your facts are already wrong.
It has not been signed.
No, I don't. I think like it was just said it was going to be signed, and then now it's still it's like on her desk with other stuff. As long as we get betting by or close to the beginning of football season, that's good on me. Probably not good on Dalton. StreamYard still works like on your phone, so as long as you have cell service wherever you're living, we should still at least be good for the pod, though.
Yeah, we'll see if I get cell service under the bridge nearby.
Johnny, you've I think been in like 8 different states since the last time we had a podcast. How are you?
I'm tired. I'm done traveling for a while. I just came back from San Fran and New York City and Kansas City. But yeah, that's enough traveling for the year. Might go to Indianapolis, I think, to the Final Four next year because KU's going to run it back.
We'll see about that one. But
it might be in Houston, but yeah.
Well, regardless of where it's at. All right. We can start, Dalton, at the quarterback position. We'll go quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end in that order. It's only right we start with Jalen Hurts to lead off this show. We weren't as different as I thought we were going to be here. I have him at QB9, which actually, before we start, I should say, it may not be when you're listening to this podcast. It definitely will not be if you're watching this YouTube video live today or like early tomorrow. But sometime soon, I think we'll just put like the spreadsheet of these ranks on our Substack. You'll get that email so you guys can go back and reference those, so we don't have to read all the way through all of them. But Jalen Hurts, QB9 for me, QB6 for you, Dalton. Do you want to defend your guy, or do you want me to? I'm not gonna say trash. He's QB9. I think like there's 9 guys who I could see being QB1, and he's the last one. But I'm still a few spots lower. So which way do you want to start this?
Well, it's very nice of you to say that he could be QB1. That's an improvement. We're working through it.
But like where other people maybe give it like a 40% chance, I'm giving it like a 5% chance.
Well, I'm going to be pretty bullish on the Eagles as a whole this year. They start out with one of the easiest NFL schedules. And I think that the important thing about all of that is with such an easy schedule to start, the Eagles are going to come out passing strong like they did last year. And that's when Jalen Hurts really saw a huge increase in his fantasy value, was when they were passing it. The addition of A.J. Brown really makes me think that this team is going to move forward and be aggressive in passing. And that's where so much more of his value comes from. And I mean, he was QB9 last year, and he missed 2 games. And then a third game, he only played 70% of the snaps because he got hurt. So, we look like we've seen his floor this year, at least in my opinion.
Is his value really maximized when he's passing the ball? I think that's the big question for me is, can he actually pass the ball well enough to be like a top 5 or 6 quarterback? Because if he had like proven to be, let's say like an average to like average to like good or pretty good passer in the NFL, I think I'd feel pretty good saying, yeah, this is like a top 6 guy, but he hasn't proven that yet, but you're sold that he's going to be effective passing the ball this year is what you're saying.
No, I'm not sold he's going to be an effective passer. I'm sold that the more they pass, the more fantasy points he will get. Last year at the start of the season, he saw some of his biggest points games. I mean, Kansas City, he had 28. Tampa Bay, he had 25. The first game of the season, Atlanta, he had 28. At all of those games, he saw over 30% of the snap or 30 pass attempts, when they go to that run heavy style, he's not always the one rushing the ball, and it really caps his ability to be a really truly QB1 at the fantasy position.
Mm-hmm.
So if they come out passing and very aggressively passing, like I think they want to do, then I think he is way more certified to be a top quarterback.
So just real quick on the injury thing, you said he missed 2 games, and then there was a third where he played like 2/3 of the game. Is that right?
Yeah, Detroit, he played 78% of the snaps, and then he missed a game to an ankle injury, and then he sat out the last game of the year because they already were in the playoffs.
He's a guy that I think that I'm more worried about injury than like the average NFL quarterback because of how much he runs. He's a thick guy, but he's not like Josh Allen, like he's not like a physical specimen, like 6'5", 240 pounds. Like he's 5'11", a very solid, like whatever. He probably is listed at like 210.
But you got your boy Murray right over him. And if we're talking about a quarterback who likes to get injured, Kyler's great at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's fair. And I have Murray lower than you. So I'm not a huge Murray guy.
That is also true.
But here's my thing with Hurts. It's funny. This is probably the one guy I actually did like real research on as I was doing these ranks. 10 rushing touchdowns for him last season, 0 for Miles Sanders. I think it's like pretty obvious we're going to see some sort of give there. Number 1 for Sanders, and number 2, we're probably not seeing 10 from Jalen Hurts again. Like it's possible, but Josh Allen's never had 10 rushing touchdowns in a season. Like that's a very high total for even a elite quarterback runner. And he had 784 rushing yards last year too. And like Josh Allen has had years in the 400s and 500s. So if that rushing goes to like a very good, but not elite, like 506 rushing touchdowns, I think that's a concern. If that were to happen, which is at least in the range of outcomes for him, I'd say. And then there's the passing. All of these stats, and I have a lot of them, are from Player Profile. So the Eagles, you mentioned that if they do come out and pass, that's a big advantage for him, and that's how he's going to score more points. They ranked 19th in game script last season, but they were behind with a negative 0.43. So basically what that means is they were playing from behind more often than ahead, that they were just below middle of the pack, and yet they were still 29th in passing plays per game in the NFL. So that to me reads as a team that doesn't fully trust the guy as a thrower just yet. And then if you're looking at his throwing stats, he does not put the ball in harm's way very often, just looking at the interception totals and looking at some of the other stats I'll get to here. But he's 26th in accuracy rating, 31st in true completion percentage, which that eliminates under pressure throwaways and drops from that number. 25th in pressure completion percentage and 23rd in clean pocket completion percentage. 29th in true passer rating and 19th in QBR. He's also 30th in catchable pass rate. Like AJ Brown is definitely going to help him just as like a purely yards after the catch guy. And also just AJ Brown's awesome. Like he's going to be able to go win balls downfield. No doubt about it. But also like his receivers, like his passes, he was 7th in receiver target separation. His receivers had about 2 yards of separation per target, which again, top 10 in the NFL, which that surprised me, quite frankly, when I saw that stat. So I think you can glean a few things from that. Number 1, Gard and Smith are actually like pretty good, both had pretty good seasons last year. And then number 2, like I said before, he doesn't take too many chances with the ball because he doesn't have to. When the guys are wide open, that's where he's going. And when they're not, he's probably tucking and running. He's probably scrambling, maybe throwing away or trying to make plays elsewhere. I think he's got the upside to be the QB1, but he's going to have to take like a Josh Allen-esque leap as a passer. And that's just a really tough thing to predict. And it's also really tough for me to rank him ahead of the guys who have done it more often in their careers than him to this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, to start at the get-go of it, he obviously takes leaps forward as a passer, but also last year was essentially his rookie season after not playing much his first year. So I'm willing to give him a pass on some of the accuracy issues. Secondly, I mean, the Eagles' entire philosophy as an organization changed after the 5th game of the year, where I think they were 2-3 and they were very much struggling, and it was an uphill climb for them. And that philosophy changed into a very run-heavy team. They finished 32nd in the NFL in pass attempts. And I can definitely see his rushing totals coming down. But at the same time, you also have him only throwing for 18 touchdowns last year.
Mhm.
And with a guy like A.J. Brown in the red zone, I think that drastically changes it. His receivers definitely got separation, but I also think Devonta Smith is not a receiver that fits the skill set that Hurts needs, which is Hurts is not a deep passer. That's not his skill. It's not what he's great at.
But Devonta Smith can get open like anywhere on the field, though. That's his whole thing. I, as a Hurts doubter and you as a Hurts lover, would phrase that differently. I would phrase it as Hurts doesn't fit the skill set that Devonta Smith needs, which is a guy that's actually willing to throw it over the middle, throw it the traffic some, because he's not going to be a guy who's doing a ton of deep stuff that's like wide open where he's just taking shots.
Absolutely. But I mean, last year,
Waddle.
Smith got a ton. He was just the X receiver a ton of the time, and definitely by a mile was the best receiver on the Eagles.
Yes.
I think A.J. Brown is going to just drastically improve their ability to pass, give them a lot better contested catch situations. And we saw it with Tannehill. I mean, A.J. Brown can take a 5-yard slant route to the house just anytime he catches the ball. And I think there's just some positive variation. Even if you decrease the rushing totals for Hurts, you're still getting a lot of positive correlation in the passing game, which I think they're definitely going to emphasize at the start of this year.
Those are a lot of big words you just threw at me. I think we have to bow down at the end of this argument. Joe Burrow. This is not a guy we disagree on, Dalton. This is actually a guy that we are, QB 11 for me, QB 9 for you, so fairly close. I would venture the guess. I didn't look at ADP like maybe you did, but I venture the guess that we're on the lower end of Joe Burrow ranks. I just thought maybe we could take a second and explain why we both have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase as like top 10 to 12 guys, but Burrow isn't like a surefire top 8 quarterback for us.
Well, I mean, to start, Joe Burrow's ADP and underdog is QB 7, right under Jalen Hurts, who is QB 6. And my big issue with Burrow is, and I think anybody who's listened to this podcast for any period of time knows this, I'm not a big believer that he is like this elite ceiling quarterback. The other pocket passers you and me have ranked highly in the top 12 are Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. And Joe Burrow
and Matt Stafford is in both of our top 12.
Yes,
sorry. And for me, after the Rodgers Brady, it was like, okay, who do I want, Stafford or Burrow? And I think I'd have to go back and double check, but I think I gave the edge to Stafford. I put him at 10.
Yeah. And it's just Joe Burrow isn't going to rush the ball. He's not going to move the ball, which is kind of a fancy cheat code. And if you look at his game log, he really inflated his stats in those last couple of games of the year, one being the Kansas City game, where he went absolutely berserk and he played really well, and the other being the Baltimore game, where Baltimore didn't have a secondary. Mm-hmm. And I think Joe Burrow is a good quarterback, and he has the weapons to do it, but you're not going to get the same consistent floor that you get with rushing quarterbacks with Joe Burrow. And I just don't think he's like a league winner like the Josh Allens or the Patrick Mahomes can be.
Mm-hmm. I agree. If you look at his finish last year, so he's QB 5 in 17 games. He plays 16 of them. He didn't play the last week of the season. So he plays 16 games, which is the entire weeks 1 through 17 of fantasy scoring that I'm looking at. But that's in front of guys like Kyler Murray, who was injured, Jalen Hurts, who missed multiple games, Lamar Jackson, who missed a handful of games, Russell Wilson, who had a disaster of a second half of the season and missed multiple weeks, and Aaron Rodgers, who was behind them by like 2 points because he didn't want to get a COVID shot and got COVID, and so couldn't play for like a whole 10 days. He also played, like I said, all 16 games, and I talk about Jalen Hurts as an injury risk. We've seen Burrow making headlines for his comments about, oh yeah, I don't mind taking those sacks at all. It's if you look at it, it's good for EPA, yada yada. That could be true. I'm not going to get in the nerdy analytics side of that debate, but just from a pure staying healthy perspective, I don't like that. I would be surprised if Burrow played. I'm not going to predict him to play every game that he wants to play essentially this year, like last year. So I think I'm factoring that downside in as well. And then just concerning Higgins and Chase, I just think it's likely we see the passing game consolidate even more around those two than we did last year. We even saw that in the second half of the season once Higgins came back and was fully back from his ankle injury. I think he was wide receiver 7 and Chase was wide receiver 6 for the last 6 weeks of the season. And I think I'd give more of an edge to Chase. I had Chase higher than that and Higgins lower than that. But I think like that similar breakout is what we're going to see between those two.
Yeah, I agree. And to end this, I don't like the play calling by the Bengals head coaching staff. I tweeted about it, and so did you. Zach Taylor, his play calling really irks me, and I do think that kind of holds Joe Burrow's ceiling back. A lot of those 3rd and 2 runs, 1st and 10 runs that set you backwards as an offense.
Yep, I agree. All right, on to running backs, and the first one is Javonte Williams. So he is my RB8. Dalton, he is your RB14, which, 6 spots difference when we're doing top 36s. Like that doesn't seem huge on paper, but this high up, I feel like that actually is a pretty big difference. That's basically, I'm saying he's probably a guy you take at the turn. You're saying he's probably a guy you take mid to late 2nd round, I would imagine. I'll go first. I'll give my positive side for Javonte here. I think I'd be more concerned for him if they let Melvin Gordon go and then brought in somebody new, like of that stature. I'm not sure if there's like anybody available or they could have gotten or like even would have made sense of that stature. But like, you get what I mean? Like if they would have let Melvin Gordon go and like Chase Edmonds comes to town or like, I don't know, like a guy of Melvin Gordon's stature. But to me, they bring Gordon back. It kind of feels like he knows the system. Let's run it back. Let's kind of keep status quo. But we see this a lot in the NFL where, okay, we start to phase out the veteran a little bit more and bring in the new guy along a little bit more, which not all the time, but like Javonte Williams, I think he proved is awesome last year.
Yeah.
Melvin Gordon had a great year last year too, but Javonte is like very clearly the long-term guy in Denver. So I just think this year we're going to see a bigger gap between the two, which last year there was literally no gap. I looked at the snaps. It was 49.9% was what Javonte Williams played last year. So like legitimately a true 50-50 last year. And then you just look at some of the box score stuff for Javonte. He played all 17 games, which you can make the argument, hey, like that's probably not happening again, which I would agree. Like I'm not going to predict a running back play all 17 games. But he only had 7 total touchdowns. Part of that is Melvin Gordon's there. Part of that is the offense was absolutely dog water last year. Should be much improved with Russell Wilson at quarterback this year. And even still, he was the RB16 last year. I just think with a better offense and let's say it gets closer to 60-40 or like 65-35. Like I still think Melvin Gordon's like a flex like guy, like top 36 guy. I think I have him like 33, 34, somewhere in that range. I think we both have him in that range.
Yeah.
I just think that there's just a little more oomph to the ceiling of Javonte's value. And, I mentioned Javonte played every game. Melvin Gordon played 16 games last year. The one game he missed, Javonte was awesome. Even if Javonte plays 15 games, the odds of there only being one game that he plays without Melvin Gordon and probably vice versa, the odds of Melvin Gordon playing no games without Javonte, like pretty low. So I think maybe some of the worst injury luck could be offset by these guys are probably going to have a week or two to be solo acts that they didn't have last year.
Yeah. Well, and if we remember in my way too early rankings, I had Javonte top 12 before the Melvin Gordon signing. And by all means, Javonte Williams is arguably like a top 5 NFL talent at running back. He posted an elite separation last year. He was elite at forcing missed tackles. Great player. Really, there are 2 reasons why I dropped him in my rankings. First, this is just kind of like a game theory way, like I approach fantasy football. If you take him at the turn, he's probably your RB1. And more likely than not, there are going to be weeks that frustrate you because Melvin Gordon comes in at the goal line and gets the touchdown, and Javonte Williams doesn't have a great week. And with some of the guys I ranked ahead of him, I don't think that's the case. And secondly, I'm worried that he's not going to be the guy getting the receptions. Last year in targets per route run, Javonte Williams posted a 1.2, which is good, but Melvin Gordon was a 1.5. Like for all-encompassing purposes, Melvin Gordon was really, really good last year, despite the fact that he's almost 30. And I don't want Javonte Williams to not get the passing down work if I'm taking him that early. And when you kind of combine it all together, I would just prefer at the turn to advise people to take somebody who they're going to be a lot more trustworthy week to week. And I think end of season, maybe Williams does come out, top 10, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that his consistency as a player doesn't reflect the end game, where he might have you a 30-point week and then you're going to have two, 8-point weeks just because he gets vultured twice.
I definitely like don't disagree with that. What I would say in response though is like, how many are we at like 5 running backs and 5 wide receivers who we can say like are going to be consistent, like RB1 or wide receiver 1 guys like throughout this? Like, I think he's just part of that pack of like 12 guys who can be top 12 a lot of weeks and then also really frustrate you a lot. Like, I think I think there's a lot of guys that are like that. So at the end of the day, it's kind of pick your favorites, and that's why he ends up at 14 for you, 8 for me. I am curious. I'll go a little bit out of order here. I'm curious and frankly shocked. You have J.K. Dobbins 1 spot ahead of Javonte Williams at RB13. I'm the low man, RB16 on J.K. Dobbins here. I don't have much to say on the guy, but we did get the report today that he's off to the side, not doing anything yet, which isn't surprising. Like, I'm not reading anything into that, but his recovery will be one to watch, and he has some upward mobility or downward for me, depending on how things go on that end. But just for you, J.K. Dobbins versus Javonte Williams, like what's the separator there? It's only 1 spot, but
yeah, how the turntables on this one. But at first I was scared of J.K. Dobbins. I thought that he was going to be a guy who wasn't going to come back from his injury well. I think he is, and the Ravens are recommitting to their original identity, which I think is a run-first offense. You look at their passing core, and it's Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, and then James Proche and Devin Duvernay. It falls off really quickly. They invest highly in the best center in the draft, one of the best run-blocking grades out of Taylor Lindenbaum. And so I'm very excited. I think even with a split workforce, these two can do very well between Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. But especially when putting him above Javonte Williams, I just think they're going to run the ball way more. There's going to be an offense that runs often, runs frequently, and they're going to establish that identity the Ravens have had the last 5 years, probably in the league in the number 1 rush attempt offense again. And just last but not least, I was concerned that Dobbins might be hurt, but him and Edwards injured at the same time. And so far through OTAs, Gus Edwards hasn't practiced. I think he might be the one lagging behind in injury. And if J.K. Dobbins ever gets an 80% workload in this offense, I mean, he's to the moon. That's close to RB1 status. And so
he would be if he's healthy and getting that work. I just think those are both very big questions for Dobbins at this point.
Yeah. But I like him more. I think even if Javonte Williams was the RB1 in Denver, it's harder for him to hit that ceiling than it is for JK.
Mm-hmm. Okay, 2 more really interesting running back debates here, and then we have 2 kind of gross ones to close out before we get to receiver. Antonio Gibson, I think this is probably our biggest difference. I'm looking down the list. This may be our biggest difference for as far as like the higher ranked guys. I have him as RB18. Dalton has him at RB30. So Dalton, you're telling us that Antonio Gibson is an RB3. Explain yourself.
I don't see a world where things get better for Antonio Gibson. Last year, the reason he posted a top 20 finish was because he had a very high touchdown rate. We now have Brad Robinson, who, if anything, he's an early down plotter and a touchdown stealer. And then Antonio Gibson doesn't get the passing down work because J.D. McKissic comes home. And I don't know. Maybe Carson Wentz is an upgrade for this offense, but I don't really think it matters. I think this offense.
I think it is. Like I like Wentz was at least like functional for the Colts last year. Now they clearly wanted to get him out of town for whatever reason, whatever was going on in their locker room with Wentz and whoever. But just like from a pure football perspective, he's better than what they had last year, because what they had last year like almost got Terry McLaurin killed on like 4 times a week.
Yeah. But this is just a flag plant. The guys I have in front of them, I think all of them are either in better offenses or in committees where I trust them more. And I just don't want Antonio Gibson this year.
So you trust Chase Edmonds and the Miami Dolphins backfield more than Antonio Gibson?
I do. Yeah, I will flag plant.
That's insane to me. That's insane to me.
I also think Antonio Gibson isn't what we thought he was coming into the NFL. He so far in his career, he hasn't posted any elite marks like other guys do in bad offenses.
I guess I don't know what we thought he was. Like, he's been good. Like he's been solid. Like maybe he's been disappointing for the people who thought he was like going to be a top 8 running back, but I don't think I was ever like quite there with Gibson. Like his rookie year, like went from he was like undrafted in fantasy leagues, like late round pick to immediate like starter pretty much. And then last year it was like, this is going to be a nice RB2. Was the ride always smooth? No, kind of like what you talked about, what it could be with Javonte, but like at the end of the day, he got you there. He got you there as a top 20 guy. I agree with your concerns for sure. We've talked about this. But I think this is a situation where your hate has gone a little too far. I've got him at RB 18. I myself just did like a really quick ranking exercise before the NFL draft. And I think that was before McKissick reversed course and came back to Buffalo when I did these ranks. I had Gibson at RB 11. So I moved him down a solid seven spots. From there, I just think where you have him is like his floor to me. Like I think like RB 30 is like everything goes wrong besides like as long as he plays like a reasonable amount of games. I think that's everything goes wrong. Okay, like this guy should be getting volume in the passing game like he should have been for the last 2 years. It still isn't happening. Why isn't it happening? Okay, Brian Robinson is stealing touchdowns from him now. Like this is just hell on earth having Antonio Gibson. Like I think that scenario, like it's possible, but I think that is the lowest possible outcome for him is RB 30. I still think this is one of the 15 most talented running backs in the NFL. The workload probably isn't going to be what the biggest Antonio Gibson truthers had ever hoped for, but I just feel like this is a floor rank, and I kind of shot for the middle with Antonio Gibson. And it just frankly, like after like looking at my list after like we'll say RB 21, it gets real uncertain because I've got David Montgomery at 20, who like definite track record of not loving David Montgomery, but like I think you can count on him to be a solid like RB2 on your team. And you have Josh Jacobs, who like I feel pretty good about, but there are still questions. But then after that, Travis Etienne, who I mean, talk about camp hype through the roof, like that's all we're seeing right now is how great this guy's going to be. Breece Hall is a rookie. Elijah Mitchell, which God only knows with the Niners backfield. Miles Sanders, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, AJ Dillon, like there's a lot of question marks once you get past that spot in my rankings. So that's just kind of the last guy I feel good about, frankly, like really good about.
Yeah, I don't feel good about him at all. I mean, guys I have in front of him, Damian Harris, I think he's a better runner than Gibson, pure runner. Elijah Mitchell, a better offense that's going to give him better weeks. Chase Edmonds, so I think we might talk about in a bit. Breece Hall, somebody I think that's committed. When you draft a running back in the 3rd round and you're Washington and you have so many holes, it's a clear commitment that you don't believe in the guy you have there and that the talent there, they just don't think he has it for one reason or another. And I think they're just going to – I think his talent comes in the receiving game, and they're just going to misutilize and continue to misutilize him.
We shall see. All right, Aaron Jones, Dalton, he's your RB5, which, whoa, man, that is a high rank compared to what I've seen, I feel like. I'm RB10, which I think feels more in lockstep with consensus, but I haven't looked as closely probably as you have. I'll let you give the pro Aaron Jones as a top 5 running back spiel first.
Yeah, Aaron Jones is an ADP of 9 right now, so definitely not as high as I'm ranking him. I feel similar to this situation about how I felt about Austin Eckler last year. This is going to be Aaron Rodgers' number 1 red zone target in an offense that, despite the lack of weapons in the receiving game, I think they're still going to be able to move the ball because they have a Pro Bowl or a 2-time MVP at quarterback, and their offensive line gets better. I think it's not crazy to come out and say that Aaron Jones could possibly lead this team in targets this year, and that's a very valuable asset. This is definitely a ceiling ranking, but the reason for that is that his range of outcomes includes that ceiling with a very, very good floor where he's consistently targeted by Aaron Rodgers. He gets 10 to 11 rushes a game, and he's in an offense that moves the ball up and down the field that gives you that touchdown equity you're looking for.
I had a real hard time figuring out what to do with Aaron Jones. But real quick, I do want to note, I am realizing that since I forgot Alvin Kamara in like there's a copy paste there at some point yesterday. So everyone I've listed in the top 11, Yeah, I have, or top 15, I have to adjust their rank up. So J.K. Dobbins actually is 17, not 16. Aaron Jones, 11, not 10. Antonio Gibson is still 18, I believe. Let me check. Yeah, Gibson's still 18. And then Javonte Williams is actually RB9, not 8. So just wanted to get that in there. But I think if Devontae Adams had come back, he would have been like even like 5 spots lower for me. So I am giving him a little bit of a post Devontae Adams bump. I just don't think I don't buy that he's going to lead the team in targets and or receptions this year because I don't think we're ever going to see massive Aaron Jones volume because I think the Packers have shown a commitment throughout his entire career to have there always be a second guy. Or in the case of like targets, I believe they're probably going to show commitment to just not overworking him because they've never overworked him in his career and it's kept him relatively healthy so far. Like I think what they're doing is probably the wise thing. So I just don't totally buy. This is impossible to like know either way, but I just don't totally buy that like, oh, he's going to lead the team in targets. Like, is he the most talented receiver that they have? Like, I think you could make that argument, but I'm just not sure they're going to exert him that much. And then I had such a tough time with AJ Dillon. So he's my RB25. And I think I said when we did our first round of ranks and I had Aaron Jones right outside my top 12 overall. And this was right before Devontae Adams left or right after, I can't even remember. But I said at the time that I'm having a real hard time with AJ Dillon, and I could easily see the gap between those two being way smaller than it has been ever before. And I think it is with 25 and 10 being the splits, but like I could easily, like with more research and just more thought, talk myself into a slightly lower Aaron Jones and slightly higher AJ Dillon. Like I think Dillon might be kind of a sleeper in the mid 20s this year. And so that's a concern for Jones for me as well.
Yeah, I have AJ Dillon ranked the same as you right now at 27, and I think he's going to have a good season. Obviously, right outside the top 24 for running backs. It's really both of our wide receiver rankings. We don't have a Packers wide receiver in them. We don't have Robert Tonyan in our top 12 tight ends either. I think this team's going to need to run the ball, and Aaron Jones is coming in the 3rd year of his contract. I think this might be a year they look at him and they say, you have to be the guy. But more importantly, I do really think Aaron Rodgers values familiarity over a lot of things when it comes to how he plays football. It took him 3 years to make Devontae Adams look like a superstar. And, you know, he brought back Randall Cobb despite that he was washed. He wanted James Jones back when he brought him back. Him and Jordy Nelson had a connection. I just think he values familiarity over everything else. And between Watson, Dubs, and Sammy Watkins and Alan Lazard, I just don't know if any of those guys can compete with Aaron Jones. So I'm just betting on skill here and saying that the best player is going to rise to the top, and that if this team wants to win, they might have to use it more than they would like to, or they have in the past.
It's possible. We're also doing this on June 1st, right? So like maybe Odell Beckham, maybe there's another veteran that's added to that team, but it's Green Bay. So Will Fuller, also possible, but it's Green Bay, so I'm not necessarily counting on it. But it's at least a distinct possibility, and that would probably change how we think about the offense a little bit if they added somebody else we could trust as a receiver. Okay, Chase Edmonds and Devin Singletary. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on either of these two guys, but I have Edmonds as RB31, Dalton RB25. Really, all I feel like my logic here is with Edmonds is I don't trust any Dolphins running back, so I don't want the most expensive Dolphins running back. If I'm going to have a Dolphins running back, he's going to be a cheaper running back. I'm not investing in Chase Edmonds, who, yeah, like, does he have the upside to be a top 24 running back? Yeah, probably. But like, so does Mostert, so does Sony Michel if things break right, and you just have to spend way more on Edmonds. And I think the downside for him is even lower than some of these other guys in that same range. Like Cordero Patterson's in that range, Kareem Hunt, AJ Dillon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like all of those guys are same ballpark for both of us, and I feel better about them than Edmonds.
Yeah, and I'm over consensus on him right now. He's RB 35, so actually you're over consensus on him as well. It
Yeah,
is funny.
I might have to lower him just because you said that because I've never really bought Edmonds, never really like liked him very much as
Yeah.
he's been like fine. He's the definition of a jag.
Well, I feel like putting James Cook above him, who's one spot, is a little egregious. This is a follow the money play. I mean, the Dolphins definitely paid the guy to
You
play
know I hate
there.
follow the money
I know
plays.
you
I
do.
hate follow the
But
money plays.
when it comes down to it, they paid him to be there. Somebody's going to get the majority of rush attempts. It is a new coaching staff, too. It's not the same staff that did this really annoying running back by committee approach where they had guys literally splitting like 30% all the way down the line.
Yes, but where is this coach from?
He's a
that now
Shanahan
coaches?
disciple.
Interesting.
But that also means that there are going to be weeks that you wish you owned the guy. I did not realize until just now that I had him this far above consensus. But again, I mean, this offense has to be better. The offensive line is definitely going to be better. And I do think that somebody in this team is going to be worth it. It's funny that you're taking my approach of taking the cheapest guy while I'm going with the approach. I think I'm going to stay above consensus on Edmonds because I think a top 24 season is pretty easy for him. And out of
I disagree. I really don't think so. They have three guys, and none of like if Raheem Mostert is a top 24 running back, would that floor you? No. If Sony Michel's a top 24 running back, would that floor you? No, it would not.
if 30-year-old Raheem Mostert plays a full season, I would be very floored.
Yes, but let's give him 12 games. Let's just give all of these guys like an average bill of health because that's all we can assume right now. Like I could see any of those guys being top 24 running backs if it all hits, and that's why none of those guys are incredibly valuable because it's hard to separate them too much.
Yeah, just out of all of them, Edmonds is the only one that I think plays a receiving role at the same time. Although Lynn Bowden was back on Twitter today catching balls, so we'll
I'm
see.
not buying that.
Yeah.
I agree with you, but it's just like he's the most valuable of those three right now. But do I want to pay for him when I could just take a stab at one of those other two guys later? No, I'm not really. I'm not real. I'm not going to have Chase Edmonds on any team probably this year.
That's fair. I just feel like 110 is still really cheap for him at ADP.
Devin Singletary, I did not rank him in my top 36. Dalton has him at RB 29. Last year, he was the RB 25. That was basically by virtue of the guy played all 16 of the rankable games. He averaged 8.4 points per game. Zach Moss was pretty much off the team by week 11, was like a healthy scratch multiple times, was less than 30% of the snaps other times. And those were in games where like Buffalo is murdering the other team. Let's get Zach Moss in there with the backup quarterback. That wasn't him being a factor. So all of that contributes to a solid season by the numbers for Singletary. I think James Cook is going to be a factor on that team, not to the tune of being a top 36 guy. At least I don't think so. No, I didn't rank him top 36. Not that high, but he's going to hurt Singletary's value, I think. And I'm just not like until proven otherwise, I'm not going to believe that a Buffalo running back is going to be exceptionally valuable. It's going to take health and good luck behind him on the depth chart again this year, I think, for Singletary to really pay off on your team. I hate to say this because I like the guy, but I think he's kind of one of those fantasy anchors, guys that you just can't drop off of your team, but you don't enjoy having them on your team because he, more often than not, is 6 points unless there's a touchdown.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm above. I can't believe you're not putting him in the top 36. He still is a starting running back in a good offense. First, I mean, I do really think that James Cook hype train has gotten out of control. The guy is a pass catcher. He had like 100 career rush attempts at Georgia. He's not a guy that's going to run the ball and not run effectively. And
who else doesn't run the ball? The Bills. So that also like kind of like it's just you're already just not much volume for Singletary. And I didn't necessarily say, and I know you're not saying this, I don't necessarily see Cook like being the top rusher, but just his overall presence. Like he is going to take Singletary off the field more than he was off the field last year.
I mean, that's really hard to do. I mean, until week like 14, he didn't play more than 40 or 50% of the snaps. It took and then from weeks 14 to 18, Devin Singletary was RB5 in points per game. I mean, all of his fantasy value that led him to a good finish came in those last couple of weeks. He went 11, 16, 16, 23, and 24 to end the season when he finally got a closer to full workload. I just think that you're going to be able to use him more effectively. I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Moss gets cut. And then there's a non-zero chance that James Cook comes out and is an ineffective pass catcher. And if he can't catch passes effectively, then Singletary is the last guy left in the room. And so this is really just one of those guys I like to take a little bit of a head. I like to bet on it. It's a running back in a good offense, and you can run with it from there.
Well, I got news for you. This is why he had such a good close to a season. Carolina, New England, Atlanta, the Jets are his week 15 through 18. The Bills smoked all of those teams, so they could just say, yeah, we'll give you 23 carries for 110 yards against Atlanta. Sure, why not? That's just not, even if he's playing a majority of the snaps, that's just not who they are. And I again, hate to say it, I like Singletary. I just don't see him as a top 36 guy. But we can move on to wide receivers here. And the first one, we will start with former Chief, current Dolphin, current 2-and-on leader, Tyreek Hill. Wide receiver 6 in my ranks, Dalton. Wide receiver 11 for you. I'll defend myself and then let you go at it next. This is less about me planting some flag in Tyreek Hill and more about me feeling like after I get past 5, it's real flat. It's real flat from about 6 to, let me look at my actual ranks here, from like 6 to 14. From Tyreek Hill to Michael Pittman, I have a very hard time separating those guys. And there's a lot of guys who, like AJ Brown, he scares me on a new team. DJ Moore, like the Panthers are trash. DJ Moore can never catch more than 4 touchdowns. Deebo Samuel might be one of the scariest players in fantasy football for me this year. So like, I think Tyreek Hill is just kind of the best of that group that features some of those guys for me. And you mentioned it. I do think the offense is going to be better because it's hard not to be after last year. Tyreek is going to help that offense a lot. He's going to make life easier for Tua and for everybody else there. He's probably, just by sheer positive regression, even with a way worse quarterback, he's probably going to hit on more deep balls this year than last year. Partially just positive regression, partially because teams are probably going to be more apt to dare Tua to throw deep, take away the short stuff, take away the stuff where Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle can beat you after the catch. And okay, Tua, let's see if you can actually throw an accurate ball 50 yards down the sideline like you did in college. So we'll see there. Tyreek Hill, it's just like looking back at last year too, I found this interesting. He was negative 2.77 fantasy points per game, worse than expected last year. So he even like had some pretty bad luck himself, just fantasy wise last year. Contested catch rate was way down from what you'd expect. He was like at 50% last year. He was way higher the year before. I think maybe we see a little bit of a bounce back year for luck for Tyreek Hill. And like I said, I just feel better about, like, he's still one of the 3 best receivers in the NFL for me in my mind too. And that's kind of the tiebreaker for me with a lot of these other guys who all make me nervous for various reasons.
Yeah, and I agree. First, I would say probably after CD for me, it's pretty flat for a while at receiver. I mean, Hill at 11, the guys I have above him, I think Debo's probably going to take a hit by rankings too, because I think Trey Lance is the guy there. But Mike Evans has Tom Brady, gets 2, 3, 4 games without Chris Godwin. I am just an AJ Brown till I die stan. T. Higgins.
We're both higher on Brown. You're higher than me on Brown, but we're both higher than consensus on him, I think. And I'm very concerned about that.
I'm not. I love it. And Hill finished wide receiver 6 last year. You talk about some of the metrics not being the best for him. He also had Patrick Mahomes, and this ranking, part of it's factoring, like, what if Tua just actually does suck? Like, there's a non-zero chance.
He definitely could. He absolutely could.
And then Hill will still have his Tyreek Hill games where he takes a ball 80 yards and a touchdown. Absolutely. But This is just factoring in that bottom where we really just don't know. And Tua is one of the big question marks. And I think odds than not, he's probably an above average to an average quarterback. But out of everybody else I put above him, I trust their quarterbacking more than I do trust Tua. And so that's really what it came down to for me. The only guy who I have questions above Tyreek Hill when it comes to quarterbacking is Debo Samuel and Trey Lance. But Debo is also
You have questions about Jalen Hurts?
No, I know what Jalen Hurts is. It's not great, but it's not good,
Okay, yeah, I have him one spot above CD, so we just very slightly differ on CD Lamb there. But yeah, he's just kind of the leader in the pack of a scary group for me. DK Metcalf, a guy that we actually both agree on, and I don't know what consensus is on him. I do know I saw the footballers rank him close to like wide receiver 30 consensus in their podcast the other day. So just thought it was worth mentioning. We're not as worried as it seems like some, if not a lot of people are about Metcalf. I have him at 16. Dalton has him at 17. If Brandon Cooks can be a top 20 receiver on the Texans last year, why don't people think that DK Metcalf can be a top 20 receiver on the Seahawks? Like, for as bad as Drew Lock is and as bad as that situation looks to be, I don't think it's as bad as the Texans one was last year. And we're already baking that into his rank. Like, if he had a good or even like average situation, he's just straight up a better player than CeeDee Lamb. He'd probably be like wide receiver 5 or 6 with a similar, like if he was put him in Minnesota and take Justin Jefferson off of it, like DK Metcalf is probably wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. I just think he's good enough to overcome a lot of a bad situation. Just not quite good enough to put him in the top 10 like he would be normally.
Yeah, well, and his ADP right now is 20, so he's wide receiver 20. So we're both above.
We're both above by only a handful, so that's even higher than I thought it was going to be.
But people are putting DJ Moore. His ADP is wide receiver 14. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that when it comes to organizational competency, I might think the Seattle Seahawks are better off than the Panthers right now. And when it comes to talent, DK might be a better receiver than DJ Moore. They're at least pretty close in talent level. I don't understand the gap in that. I'm probably going to be banging the train. Same thing. Tyler Lockett's at wide receiver 42. So this is the third straight year I will be screaming that he is a value. You'd be both agree that he's wide receiver 30 in our rankings. I mean, these guys are really good players. And whether it's Drew Lock, God forbid, or Geno Smith, God forbid, or Baker Mayfield, God forbid.
Hey, Baker would be an upgrade over both those guys. I got news for you.
These guys get open, and it's consolidated passing offense, which is something you at least want, and you can come back and rely on at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Cortland Sutton, this is probably our second biggest disagreement outside of Antonio Gibson. I have him at wide receiver 26. Dalton, you are a bullish wide receiver 15 on Cortland Sutton. Give me the Cortland Sutton breakout case.
My breakout case is Russell Wilson has his career high in pass attempts. Cortland Sutton is the alpha wide receiver in this offense. He is the guy who could win contested catches. I'm not one-to-oneing him with DK like people are doing because they're not the same player. But also he, in the last 3 years on the Broncos, has had the deepest average depth of target. He is their deep threat. He's the guy that runs the X routes the most often. And Russell Wilson has a really pretty deep ball. So you combine all of those. I just find it really hard not to rank one of the Broncos receivers in the top 18 because it's Russell Wilson, and he's never not produced a top 15 wide receiver. So this was part of me just giving it to Russell Wilson and saying, you're going to do it again because you'll probably have a career high in pass attempts, probably have a coach that lets you throw the ball more. And Cortland Sutton is my favorite out of all of those, followed by probably Tim Patrick, then Judy.
I agree with you that Sutton he's my favorite too. He's the guy I have ranked the highest. I think I have Judy like a handful of spots behind. And then Patrick, I don't have in the top 36, but I would. Maybe I don't have Judy in the top. I do. 34. So you're 32. I'm 34 on Judy. I do think I've heard the same stat you have about, Russell Wilson's always had top 15 receiver. And like Cortland Sutton is one of the more difficult guys to rank because it's really difficult. You could definitely see a breakout for Sutton where he really separates himself. It also wouldn't shock me, and this is kind of how I have it ranked right now, where if all three of those guys are relatively close in value and they, as a collective unit, make up an elite passing attack, but none of them are truly elite fantasy football options. I think I just lean more that way now because we've only ever seen one good season from Sutton, basically. I know he's had bad quarterback play. I know he blew out his ACL really early in the season before this last year. And I think he's the most talented, but I want to see him produce before I put him up at 15 ahead of other guys who are just more proven than he is at this point. Like last season, I know the quarterback play is bad. I know he's running the deep stuff, so he's even more affected than like a Tim Patrick who does less of that. But it's concerning to me that Cortland Sutton is 58 for 776 and 2 touchdowns last year. Tim Patrick is 53 for 734 and 5 touchdowns, and he even played one fewer game. It's concerning to me that they were basically the same guy last season. So and as far as the top 15 receiver thing goes, like that has a lot to do with Russell Wilson, but also like DK Metcalf is really good. Tyler Lockett is really good. Doug Baldwin, really good. Like I'm just not quite sure Sutton is there yet. He could absolutely prove it to me this year, but I'm erring on the side of guys I've seen do it, like a Terry McLaurin, like a Mike Williams who did it last year, Chris Godwin when he comes back, like Michael Thomas, who we'll get to, I think, before we're out of here. Like I just err on the side of those guys, but I definitely like totally understand the conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't disagree with you that there are definitely concerns there. But last year, the guy only gets 2 touchdowns. Like he's the biggest body threat. I think that has to go up.
Mhm.
I think Russell Wilson's going to find a guy in this offense that he gives the ball to the most. And I love Tim Patrick too. I just don't think Tim Patrick's the guy, and I really don't think Jerry Jeudy is the guy at this point. I think Jeudy is a better 2 than he is a 1.
Can we just agree that it's no matter where you have Sutton, whether it's 15, 26, 20, wherever, there should not be like 40 spots between him and Tim Patrick and ADP like I think there is right now. Like I just think that's crazy.
No, I agree. I do
Like KJ Hamler starting the season on the pup, it sounds like, or at least training camp. And even when he comes back, like I think Tim Patrick has been their number 3 guy, the most consistent guy the last 2 years. Like he's just going to be the forgotten about, like 800-yard, like solid receiver again this year, I think.
And I am really getting tired of these like 1-to-1 DK to Lockett comparisons I'm hearing all over the place about Jeudy as Lockett and Sutton as DK, and pretending like there was ever a third option in Seattle that even came close to the skill of Tim Patrick, who's a very, very good player. And in ADP, actually, Albert O is going above Tim Patrick. I noticed that which is just absurd. Like he's a good tight end, whatever, but Tim Patrick's a better player.
Yeah, Albert O's been like cool for like the 1 week out of every 8 that Noah Fant misses. Let's see him get a little bit more. Okay. I mentioned Michael Thomas. I forgot to put him on the list, but he is at least worth like mentioning. I have him at 18. You have him at 36. Don't want to spend too long on this. I am basically what I did with like some of these other guys. I think shooting right in the middle of his range of outcomes. Like it could be better. Like if he were like Michael Thomas, like truly healthy, he is probably top 12 guy. If he is not, and it's a disaster, like he could easily be closer to your rank than mine. I just am shooting the middle right now. We'll see what training camp looks like. We'll see what his participation looks like. And I just think he's still the number 1 in that offense with a bullet for right now. And it's very scary, very, very scary. But Michael Thomas, like if you get him at wide receiver, let's even say like 24 in your draft, like it could be a league winner if it really pans out. And I like taking shots on those types of guys.
Yeah, I feel like we said all these same things about him last year and he burned everybody. But I just don't
100%.
I don't want anything to do with it. I think he has a horrible attitude problem. He was a receiver whose skill set matched so perfectly with a quarterback whose best skill is 5-yard slant routes. I know he runs other routes well, but I mean, just so you know, I went all the way to 75 in my rankings. 37 is Chris Olave. And I think I'd rather have Chris Olave.
I'm not that far off. I wouldn't imagine. I've been a little surprised about the relatively low rank of all of these rookie receivers too.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, like there's going to be at least one, probably multiple rookies who finish top 36, and no one even has them like sniffing top 36. Like mid 40s is where you see Traylon Burks a lot of the time.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't have Michael Thomas ranked, and I was just like, I just have to put him on the list. That's why he's 36 in the last one we ranked. But I'll draft him around 12, I think. I mean, I really think that there's an easy outcome where this guy is just such an attitude problem, and this is an organization that's going to suck this year for the most part, that he just doesn't play, or he just decides not to play again. And then you're on to he's 30 years old almost. I mean, I just don't see a good range. Maybe he does prove me wrong. I just don't think he does. Jarvis Landry might be better than him this year.
Well, I'd be pretty surprised by that. That would take Michael Thomas almost not playing for that to happen. But okay, Juju Smith-Schuster, 24 for me, 22 for you. It feels like we're both out on a limb here because I see him like in the mid 30s a lot of places. So Dalton, just real quick, why is Juju misunderstood by 85% of the fantasy community?
Kansas City's biggest problem last year was that they didn't have a receiver that they could attack the middle of the field with, and so everybody ran too high. Kansas City now has a middle of the field receiver who last time he was paired with an elite talent, and he has Travis Kelce on the other side of the ball. He had a 1,500-yard, 10-touchdown season. It was wide receiver 6.
And to be clear, we're not saying he's going to do that, and he doesn't have like the elite take the top off guy anymore, but by committee, the Chiefs have – Sky Moore can do that. And then MVS and McCole Hardman, like by committee, they're going to have guys who can take the top off. And Juju does not have to play that role, certainly.
Well, and everybody agrees Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. I don't think.
Not everybody, but we all agree.
I think that's almost a consensus agreement. And there are people not ranking any of the pass catching options but Kelce in the top 80 in fantasy picks. It's going to hit. Somebody's going to hit. I've been a big fan of Juju for 3 years now. I mean, I just don't understand how you don't take the guy that's going to be playing out of the slot for Patrick Mahomes.
I agree. Rashad Bateman. So I'm wide receiver 31. You're 24. So you're slightly higher than me. Any particular reason why Rashad Bateman? Because he was a guy that I was talking about. I could easily see him having like a breakout year, overperforming the ADP. But it was tough for me to get him too high, because he just, with as bad luck as he had last year between he and Lamar, we just haven't seen much of him like we have some of the other guys in this range. But you're confident in Bateman this year.
Yeah, when he played, he was out-targeting Hollywood Brown. He fits the Ravens' play philosophy better. He's more of a bigger-bodied fighter. I think they pass less, but I think it's really Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman who are going to be getting those balls. And I mean, Lamar Jackson is just such a good passer. I can't not, just like with Patrick Mahomes, I can't not put one of his guys high up there other than Mark Andrews, because someone's going to hit. And Devin Duvernay and James Proche are just two names that I'm not going to bother with.
We'll see. Maybe if they don't bring anybody else in, which they're another team that feels ripe for a Julio Jones, Odell Beckham, or Will Fuller, or somebody else to come in. If they don't bring anybody else in, maybe he'll move up my list, but still early there. Gabriel Davis, not ranked for me, unsurprisingly. Dalton, wide receiver 27. Real quick, Gabriel Davis, why do you love him besides the fact that he had a huge game in the playoffs last year?
Did you know out of the 2020 wide receiver class, only Justin Jefferson has more touchdowns?
I did know that. We listened to the same podcast.
We did. Also, in games where Gabriel Davis played 50% or more of the snaps, he was a top 24 wide receiver. He averaged 15.9 points per game. And most importantly, again, somebody is going to come out of this wide receiver room. Gabriel Davis, to finish the season, had a crazy ending, and then him and Cole Beasley decided they didn't want to be vaccinated and they had to sit some games out. But once Emmanuel Sanders was phased out of this offense, it was Gabriel Davis who was really taking that up, and he's Josh Allen's most reliable red zone target. And I can't not rank him high. I think it's going to be his breakout year. It used to be that the third year was when receivers broke out, not their first year. And I think he's going to break out in this offense and just be a star.
Yeah, I can definitely, I see that range of outcomes for sure. I also see the range of outcomes where because he's going to have to make a leap, even for as good as he was in spots last year. Like, he's going to have to make a big statistical leap to actually prove your ranking correct, I think. He has 70 total receptions in 2 seasons, 35 on the dot each of his 2 years. If he does it again, he'll be approaching the Alvin Kamara 81 receptions every year of his career for a certain amount of years. So I am a little less convinced that somebody has to emerge. Like, Khalil Shakur is one of my favorites. They still have Isaiah McKenzie. They brought in, why am I blanking? Jamison Crowder in the slot too. So there are other guys. Like, I could see the outcome where it's kind of by committee. And Diggs wasn't quite the Stephon Diggs that he was the year before last year. So maybe we see a slightly better Stephon Diggs this year too. I think Gabriel Davis might be 37 on my list, 38. He was one of the last guys that I didn't rank, but I can't quite get top 30, I don't think, with him. Hunter Renfrow, a guy that I have ranked wide receiver 29. Dalton, you do not. I just think Hunter Renfrow is a really freaking good player. And I just don't think that completely goes away with Devontae Adams there. He's definitely not going to carry the value he did last year, especially down the stretch. He finishes, I think, as the wide receiver 13 or down to end the season last year. So he's not going to be that. But just think about all of the times we got the Renfrow ISO cam in the end zone last year, because he's running stuff that we've never seen, these route combos that he's running before. The dude is one of the best route runners in the NFL. His targets he received were the most accurate in the NFL. His catchable target rate was 87.5%. That's second. That is not because Derek Carr is some great quarterback. That is because the dude is open. 2.14 yards of separation per target, fifth in the NFL. His plus 11.5 catch rate over expected when he lined up wide was best in the NFL. And his 3.4 yards of target separation when he was wide was fourth. So he's versatile. He and Devontae Adams and Darren Waller, all those guys can move all around. I think he'll be the third piece, but I think a very valuable third piece. He's not going to fully go back to not startable now that Devontae Adams is there, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's hard for me to rank him when he's the third receiving option on a Derek Carr-led offense. Derek Carr's best touchdown season is 22. And I mean, I just don't really want any part of Hunter Renfrow in the sense that
but he doesn't. He can have 80 receptions for 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns, and he's going to be a top 30 guy.
Absolutely, it's just not going to be the smoothest top 30 ride. I just, when I'm taking a guy outside of the top 24, usually on my team, I'm looking for guys who are going to blow on my roster, who could move up and suddenly be in that top 20, top 15 conversation. And I mean, the only option is really just betting that Devontae Adams gets injured or Darren Waller gets injured. And I'm not going to take those bets. I don't like to bet on injuries. And I mean, he's a good slot receiver. He's just the third option in a passing offense with a quarterback who I think is very middling.
Mm-hmm. Dalton Schultz, I have him as tight end 9. We have very few tight ends to talk about here, but we do have a couple. I have him as tight end 9. Dalton, you have him as tight end 5. I just don't think I think he's a lot of these guys are very average, to be clear, once you get past the top few. I just think he's very average. I have Dak at 12. You have him at 11. So neither of us are huge Dak believers this year. And I'm just not I'm not sure that I buy Schultz getting, soaking up X percent of Amari Cooper's targets. I think you're going to see, Lamb get a lot of that. And then it's going to be a lot of guys. It gets dispersed between. And I just, what it comes down to is I like Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth, TJ Hawkinson. I just think those guys are better players than Dalton Schultz and have higher upside. If their situation breaks right, and me, I don't really like to predict what I think situation will or won't be, or at least have that be the biggest determiner in my ranks. So I just think those guys, if things break right, have higher upside.
Yeah, I mean, he was tied in 3 last year. Mm-hmm. So I'm not even necessarily predicting Cooper's targets go to him, but there's definitely less competition in that passing offense for him to get those targets. But I mean, this is just a strict, I have to respect him. He's done it. He's back in the same offense, the same system. Nothing's changed. So they're definitely going to utilize him. And now Jarwin, who last year I thought might compete with him for targets, is gone as well. So I just think he has the tight end role locked and loaded in an offense that's going to pass the ball, and they're going to move the ball up and down the field. Andy gets to play the NFC East 6 times, which is always a benefit to any team. And I just find it harder, some lower passing offenses like definitely the Eagles, probably the Pitt, and definitely Detroit. Those guys have worse quarterbacking than Dak at the end of the day.
Are we sure? Like the Cowboys are going to pass the ball, but I just think I think we think the Cowboys throw more than they actually do.
They were 6th in pass attempts last year.
Sometimes, yeah, but I just think that people talk about them, and I'm not saying you are, but just like in general, I think people talk about them as like they pass the ball more than anybody but like the Chiefs, and that's just not quite true. They're just a notch below that, so just want to.
Yeah, they're definitely a top 10 passing offense, though, and I definitely like to have the pass catchers in that offense.
Last couple guys here. We'll run through Dallas Goedert. I have him as 6. You have him as 10. Basically flipped between Schultz and Goddard. For me, I've just always liked Goddard as a player. Funny that I am the bigger believer of this pass catcher on the Eagles than you. I think he is the guy that you draft second as a pass catcher on this team. I would take him over Devontae Smith. I think he's going to have a nice year. You have him at 10. Unless you have anything to add, you can give me your Irv Smith top 12 hype train.
Kevin O'Connell comes over from the Rams. They have to pass more. It's not going to be a Mike Zimmer offense anymore. This team's going to come out and they're going to throw the ball. Irv Smith, just turning 23, absolute athletic freak. If there's any, and I'm not saying there's going to be any drop off in Adam Thielen's touchdown equity, other than Justin Jefferson, Irv Smith is going to be the one to benefit from it. And I mean, I loved him last year. His injury was just to his meniscus, so we shouldn't be too concerned about his injury causing him any problems. The guy posted the second highest vertical of any tight end in the history of the NFL draft. So he's pretty good.
I love him for all the same reasons last year. I just didn't have the courage to put him in my top 12. It feels like it just feels like I'm taking a step too far, just because it just feels worse doing it after he just missed a whole season than it did last year. But you know how much I love Irv, so I'm right there with you. I think he'd be like my next guy up. Cole Kmet was the guy that I put at tight end 12, the guy ahead of Irv. You're not a believer in the volume play for Kmet as one of like 3 guys that we actually know their name in the Bears offense.
There were 3 games last year where Justin Fields didn't complete more than 10 pass attempts.
New coaching staff.
I get it. But I'm not just going to lay the field out and say, well, it's a very dangerous game just to say, well, this guy's there and he's kind of good, so he should catch passes from him. Especially when the offensive line is just as bad. And other than Darnell Mooney, I mean, are we 100% sure Byron Pringle is as good of a pass catcher as Cole Kmet? I don't know. Probably, definitely. But I'm not just going to bet.
You don't have to do much to be tight end 12.
Absolutely. Well,
that would be what I would say.
And if I'm drafting a tight end that late, I'm looking at guys who have like opportunities to pop. Robert Tonyan, I
think Kmet does. Like if the Bears are somehow better than we expect, if they're a 7-win team instead of a 4-win team, like I think that's probably a big boost for Kmet over expected value.
I would be very surprised. I think in my range of outcomes, Cole Kmet is tight end like 20 to tight end 10 is where I would put him. I wouldn't even bet that he can be a top 8 guy.
Zach Ertz, I have tight end 11. You have him tight end 7. Is that a Hopkins boost? A no Hopkins boost, giving him tight end 7 in your mind to get off to a quick start and then kind of coast from there?
I mean, he led the Eagles in receptions several games last year. I just think he's this nice and steady target, nothing sexy. Even with Hopkins there, he's the middle of the field guy. Mm-hmm. I think some people are reading too much into Hollywood Brown because his ADP is at tight end 11, which he's never finished that low in his career.
I have Ertz at 11, and I think it's going to be a nice 6 weeks. And I think like in week 4, it's going to turn into, okay, I want to trade this guy right now. It's going to feel a lot worse to have him in 3 weeks than it does right now. And I just don't really want that ticking time bomb on my roster as like a mid-round tight end. I'd rather take him, 4 or 5 rounds later in drafts. Real quick, before we get out of here, I forgot to mention, Dalton, I am incredibly annoyed. Justin Jefferson as your number 1 receiver. Here I was flirting with it for months and just told myself I couldn't do it. Cooper Kupp had like the all-time season in modern fantasy football history, and couldn't have him not be number one. And yet here you are. You're on a limb. I say on a limb. I think Christian McCaffrey is RB1 and Justin Jefferson as wide receiver 1 is different than most people.
Definitely is. Fun stat. Allen Robinson's younger than Cooper Kupp. I'm not saying Allen Robinson's going to have a better year this year than Cooper Kupp, but when it comes to target competition, definitely increases. Before Odell got there, it was really just Robert Woods, and I think Robinson's a better receiver. Mm-hmm. And Cooper Kupp really needs that like 24% target share to repeat what he did. And I mean, Justin Jefferson's just better. He's on his 3rd year in the NFL with Kirk Cousins and is doing absolutely insane things. He has the most yards of any wide receiver in 2 seasons, and now he gets a pass-first offensive coach who wants to throw the ball, who wants to utilize him differently. I just see it happening. I think he will be the wide receiver 1, and I'm all here for it.
As much as I love Jefferson, I think this is like an ego play from me, where if I rank Kupp anything but 1, and he does anything close to what he did last year again and is the 1, it's just going to feel real bad. It's going to feel real dumb on my part to have told someone to take a guy who, yeah, Jefferson is awesome, but Kupp was worth a lot more than the next guy at receiver last year. And I think I just need to see him not be that for a 2nd year in a row before I give somebody else that crown.
Well, I thought I was crazy because I almost didn't put Jamar Chase at 3 and you put him at 4.
Who do I have at 3?
Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think Diggs is going to have a better year than he did. And I think T. Higgins will eat into Jamar a little bit more than the previous year. Dalton, anything else to add before we get out of here?
No. Jalen Hurts QB1 season is upon us.
And that is going to do it for episode 71 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe to this here YouTube channel. If you're watching, please hit that subscribe button, like the video, Half Point Per Podcast on YouTube. We will be taking at least a couple of week break, if not most of the month of June. But we'll be back around the time training camp starts, and we'll have hopefully some new and exciting stuff for the podcast, new content. There'll probably be some writing on the Substack here and there between then and now, but expect not to hear from us for a few weeks. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will talk to you all when there is only about 2 months left before football.